Honkai Star Rail tops Genshin Impact in first day mobile revenue, generating over $6 million in 24 hours. Honkai Star Rail reveals impressive Seele banner revenue. Honkai Star Rail earnings reach over $40 million in its first week. Honkai Star Rail outpaces Genshin Impact downloads in first week. Honkai Star Rail's Jinyuan is so popular he broke the payment system. Honkai Star Rail exceeds $100 million in mobile revenue in less than a month. This, ladies and gentlemen, is an issue that we like to refer to as suffering from success. There were people all around the world in every gaming community, every gacha sub-community that were claiming Honkai Star Rail was not going to be a success, that it was not going to be remotely as successful as Genshin Impact. Evidence to the contrary. Honkai Star Rail is not only setting records for a gacha game, but it is also breaking records for a gacha game. First and foremost, Honkai Star Rail tops Genshin Impact in first day mobile revenue, generating over $6 million in 24 hours. Now, this is disregarding PC revenue. PC revenue was not released for the game, nor are there any estimates regarding PC revenue. According to AppMagic, which provides data on IAP revenue reduced by platform fees and taxes, Honkai Star Rail reached $6.3 million in revenue on mobile in its first 24 hours. The game has generated over $32 million in the first 6 days since its global launch on April 26th. China happens to be the #1 country by revenue, accounting for 39% of total player spending. It's followed by Japan, the US, and then South Korea. For comparison, Genshin Impact's first day revenue on iOS and Android was around $4.6 million. So, for reference here, $4.6 million for Genshin Impact, $6.3 million for Honkai Star Rail. Now, I do want to point out here that at the time Genshin released, there was a lot of hate for it. People were claiming it was a Breath of the Wild clone. Hoyo did not have the reputation for producing, and I know some of you might contest this opinion, but high quality content and high quality games, especially with regards to how they are perceived now after having Genshin released for this length of time. Genshin Impact managed to accumulate $31.8 million in the first 6 days compared to the $32 million from Honkai Star Rail. So they're roughly comparable to one another. Hoyo went and confirmed that the game had generated over 20 million downloads globally as of April 27th. That was one day after the game launched. Within 24 hours, there were over 20 million players playing the game. Then we have the Seele banner revenue, which is going to be absolutely monstrous. Honkai Labs estimated that the revenue for the Seele banner already reached a whopping $28,811,000 as of May 6th. That is 10 days after launching. It's important to note, though, that the data only took into account the figures from the iOS App Store in China, so this could be higher if other revenue sources were added in. I mean, unless players only played it via iOS in China and only purchased via iOS in China, then naturally it's going to be higher. So $28.29 million on iOS in China alone. That is, if we take a moment here and look at Genshin as reference, China and global make up roughly the same amount of revenue per month. So by that logic, global is likely sitting at roughly $28 to $30 million as well on iOS. The cumulative total of both are probably exponentially higher when you factor in PC and Android. Now, I did go over to the Genshin Lab website, which does track every banner and revenue for every banner since Genshin's release. And I wanted to compare here the $28 million on iOS to the Venti banner. The Venti banner was, I believe, the first banner released, the first banner character release rather, released on the 25th of September. So 10 days later would have been the 5th of October. Comparing the two, 28.8 million for Seele to the 14.8 million for Venti. As is evidence here, Seele, Honkai Star Rail's very first banner, has entirely eclipsed Genshin Impact and the Venti banner. That might be because Venti was not as popular of a character as Seele is. That is completely possible. But not only did Honkai Star Rail earn more money in its first week than Genshin, not only did its first banner earned more than Genshin's first banner in its first 10 days. But Honkai Star Rail also had more downloads, more player interest than Genshin in its first week as well. Before we go any further, I just want to take a moment here to thank all of our incredible patrons. You guys allow me to continue to play games like this for a living, and I can never truly repay that kindness. Also, if you're interested, I stream over on Twitch every single weekend. You should totally come on over and join me. As you can see here, there were 10.9 million downloads for Genshin Impact in the first week of its launch, yet 20 million downloads for Honkai Star Rail, according to the tweet earlier. Honkai Star Rail doubled Genshin's total player interest, total player downloads. That is monstrous. That is an absolutely monolithic number. Now, as I noted, this game is suffering from success. What I meant by that is Jing Yuan released the banner for Jing Yuan, and so many players wanted to attempt to roll and obtain him that the entire payment platform broke. This meant that people could not top up and then subsequently could not roll for Jing Yuan. And this is, as far as I'm aware, to my knowledge, the first time this has happened. Hoyo did not anticipate this happening in Honkai. Hoyo did not anticipate this happening in any of their games, which goes to show how popular the game has become, that they weren't even capable of anticipating the amount of success that they have garnered. Then, as of the last 24 hours, revenue information has been released for roughly the first 24 to 25 days of the game's existence. Honkai Star Rail exceeds $100 million in mobile revenue in less than a month. This is disregarding PC. Now, as far as I'm aware, PC makes up roughly half of the total revenue for Genshin Impact. Maybe a little more, maybe a little less. So, by extension, Honkai Star Rail is roughly seeing similar numbers, which means that in its first 3 weeks of existing, Honkai Star Rail has likely made over $200 million, closing in on Genshin's $250 million first month revenue. Now, whether it manages to actually surpass that is another thing altogether, but surpassing Genshin on almost every front and then closing in on its first month financials is an accomplishment that no other gacha game in history can claim. Honkai Star Rail has already amassed $100 million in terms of mobile revenue. A recent chart stating the revenue earned by the game shows how much of a positive reception the game had. And again, this is 111 million, which means that if you include PC, you're probably looking at 220 to 230 million. In just 3 weeks of its release, Honkai Star Rail has already touched and gone beyond the crucial $100 million mark in terms of revenue. They probably earned back in 3 weeks the entire budget for the game, or 1/10 of a billion, if you want to look at it from another perspective. China, Japan, and the USA contributed towards 66% of the game's total revenue. According to the stats, Honkai Star Rail beat out its main rival in the gacha category, Genshin Impact, from the same developer at launch. I mean, I'm gonna be honest here, Genshin Impact is not a rival for Honkai Star Rail. Genshin Impact is an entirely different game in an entirely different subgenre of the gacha genre overall. Another contributing factor is the story and the lore of the game. I mean, let's be honest here. Players were gonna play this regardless of whether the story and the lore was good. The story and the lore are just an added bonus, which is more compact than its counterpart Genshin due to it focusing less on the open world aspect and more on the story. Also, Honkai Star Rail launched unlockable characters in the game, 2 5-star characters, Seele and Jing Yuan, them being fan favorites. A lot of players invested heavily in the game in order to acquire them. I mean, let's be honest here, Jing Yuan just released. A lot of the initial earnings, over 40 million, were from Seele alone. Now, this is absolutely crazy. Honkai Star Rail is defying all logic, defying all expectation, and is going to continue to, moving into the future, given this is a high-quality game with a high-quality story, high-quality voice acting. Yes, there are some noticeable issues with the game, but they are so minor that they're not impacting the game or its success in any capacity. Hoyo are going to simultaneously operate, develop, and publish the 2 largest gacha games in the world. And with Zenless Zone Zero right around the corner, I have absolutely no doubt they're gonna hold the top 3. Now, if Honkai Star Rail isn't your thing, then absolutely no problem. I got you covered with 2 different videos on screen right now that might be of more interest to you. Go ahead and take a look.